Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 165 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Verbonis, and I am your host of this episode, and I am joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. That is one Mr. Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob, if there's something strange in your neighborhood, if there's something weird and it don't look good, if you're seeing things running through your head, invisible man sleeping in your bed, who are you going to call?
I'm going to call the Ghost Army, Rick.
Oh, I ain't afraid of no ghost.
Oh, my goodness. You made it sound like poetry.
I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
I should have done it like William Shatner.
Oh, that
right?
would have been, yeah.
Yeah. If there's something strange in your neighborhood, if there's something weird and it don't look good, who are you going to call?
I don't know if you've noticed, Casey and I, our big thing Sunday morning, we watch the talk shows, we're news junkies.
Right.
And so the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has a cadence that is a lot like William Shatner.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we were making fun of that on Sunday over coffee, trying to like do impressions of the Secretary of State, but in a William Shatner voice, talking about world events and things like that. So, he's just such a I would say William Shatner is unique, but apparently Anthony Blinken went to the William Shatner School of Speaking. So,
well, the thing about William Shatner is his pause between
right, yeah,
dramatic effect.
Yes, and in the middle of a sentence where none would normally go.
Right,
yeah.
I want to hear you do a Blinken impersonation right now.
No, I can't. I don't work well under pressure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not professionally trained.
I hear it's not just under pressure.
There may be some truth to that. Yes.
Oh, Bob. So welcome this week. We talk once a week. How's your week been going? Are you doing all right?
Rick, I got to tell you, I think I mentioned this before, but having some stomach issues, some stomach pain. I was like thinking, I had an ulcer for a while, not like a full blown ulcer, but like the beginnings of an ulcer. This was several years ago. And I'm like, I've been under a lot of stress lately, work, and I don't know, I felt like it was coming back. And so I made an appointment to see a GI specialist, which I went to see today. And he wants me to get an endoscopy, Rick. Have you ever had an endoscopy?
I have not. Can you take me through that, please? It sounds fun.
Yeah, it's like a colonoscopy, except they stick it in the front door, like, down your throat. And the best doctors, I mean, like the better doctors, they use a different hose than they would for the colonoscopy. So that's
let's hope so.
That's the ones you want to go with, right? That's sort of the more top shelf doctors. So.
I see. So if I'm going for an appointment with one of these, I need to. That's one of the questions
you should ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you use a different hose, and if not, do you wash it off?
That you at least rinse it. Yeah. So I've had it before, and the thing is, honestly, it's not that big of a deal because you don't remember any of it. It's a lot like the colonoscopy. They give you the twilight sort of anesthesia,
or a lot like your wife's first time with you.
Yeah. No, it was memorable. It was just memorably short. But so it's so they do the whole twilight sleep, so you don't remember it. And they got to come out and tell you like everything that happened, right? But I remember the doctor telling me after in the recovery room, like, oh, you were a handful, which means they had to bring people in to restrain me.
Oh,
to make this happen, right? Because they do, like, it's not a small tube. It's like the size of like maybe a little bit bigger than a nickel. The
okay,
diameter
so
of a nickel.
Something you should be used to, yeah.
Right. So they spray your throat with all this numbing agent, and then they like snake it down. It's very quick, but you know, most people don't like that sort of sensation, and so
Of course,
they
yeah.
do anesthetize you, and you don't remember it. But I've always felt like there's some part inside my brain where that memory lingers, even if I consciously
So
don't
it's kind
remember it.
of like a one of your penguins, but he's like tripping.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, he's got his eyes closed, right? But he could
Mm.
open it at any moment and reveal that memory. And I really don't want that memory. So even though like you don't remember, you know, it's completely lost to your consciousness, a part of me is like, I don't really want to do that again. So I made that appointment for like December, like, you know, because we're recording this much earlier. So that's a month away, a little over a month away. So I figure if the situation gets better, then I can cancel it. And it does seem to be getting better. I'm taking some medicine, over the counter stuff. It seems to be improving over the last couple of weeks. So I'm hoping that trend, you know, because yeah. And then, you know, the other Benny is you don't have to go through all the prep like you do with a colonoscopy. You
Oh,
know how
that's
that
good. Oh,
is.
that
Yeah.
is horrible. I hated
Yeah.
that.
Right. I mean, it's a good weight loss, you know, regimen. But it makes for a long night. But for an endoscopy, it's like you don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like you just can't eat for like 4 hours in advance.
Well,
That's
yeah,
it.
because of that gag reflex, if
Right.
something's
Yeah.
shoved down your throat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's you know, it's no big deal.
All right. Well, good luck with that. And for everyone listening right now, you might want to go on Facebook and shoot Bob a little encouragement, some messages. Maybe a little kitty cat hanging from a tree saying, you got this, or hang in there, or whatever the case may
Right.
be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right.
It's funny. I had talk about being a handful. I back in 8th grade had to get some teeth removed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of those mutants that was born with uh 3 sets of teeth in
Oh
in
yeah.
in 2 areas. Like
Yeah.
so on my upper teeth,
Uh-huh.
one on one side and one on the other side. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
I had 3 of them. And
Wow.
so during an X-ray, they revealed this. They're like, well, we need to pull, these teeth so that the next ones come down.
Yeah.
And I just probably just grossed a bunch of people out. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, no, whatever.
Yeah.
So I go to the oral surgeon's office, and of course, they do the little gas thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And turns out, and again,
Some
eighth
people.
grade,
Yeah.
I'm probably 12 years old at this time.
Uh-huh.
Apparently,
Yeah.
I was very flirtatious with the nurses. Apparently, I
Showing
was
off your third nipple.
making a few
Oh my.
suggestive comments or come-ons, or
Wow.
flirting
Now, who
with the
took you
nurses.
to this appointment?
I think my mom
When your
did,
mom? Okay.
but it was one
Yeah.
of those things like, they take you out of the chair and they
Yeah.
put you into a recovery room, and
Yeah.
and I guess you're semi quasi awake as
Right.
they're walking you into this room where you lay down. And I
Yeah.
guess during that walk, I was like, how you doing?
And how did you hear about this behavior?
Oh no, trust me. The nurses and the doctors told my mom out,
Oh, okay, that's what I was trying to get at.
So
Yeah.
she's driving me home, and I'm probably still loopy, but later that night, yeah, at the dinner table, I'm sitting there, and yeah, I hear she's telling the story to my dad, and
Oh,
he's
that's
laughing his
awesome.
ass off.
That's great. All right. Keep a little laughing gas at home.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So Bob, we have the last couple of weeks, we have been covering panel by panel the Captain America, the Ghost Army. And it has been a lot of fun. A nice all ages graphic novel that's produced by Marvel and Scholastic. And the last 2 episodes, and listen, if you haven't listened to the last two two episodes, 163 and 164. Check them out because we do go through the Ghost Army panel by panel, and it's a lot of fun as we act that out and we give our thoughts on it and everything. But today, Bob, very excited to have the creators of that on the show today. We have the writer Alan Gratz and illustrator Brent Schoonover, and so we're very excited to talk with them today.
Yeah, the thing is, Rick, we've been trying to land these two for a long time, and you were finally able to get the job done. And so I think this is going to be really interesting talk because I know folks were really looking forward, to this book coming out. There was a lot of early concept art that had been published and was available, and a lot of buildup to this book. And I think it was well received. But these guys have been on like endless speaking tours promoting this book, and so they were very difficult to land, particularly together. But again, you managed to pull off the impossible yet again.
Well, Bob, just remember, it's not who you know, it's who I know.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let me write that one down.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I can't wait to talk to both of them. We have lots of questions. And we should probably let them out of the green room. They've been pretty patient.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we're excited to bring on our next guest. Alan Gratz is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 19 novels and graphic novels for young readers, including 2 Degrees, Ground Zero, Refugee, Allies, Prisoner B3087, and Ban This Book. Brent Schoonover is an illustrator and comic book artist, having worked on such titles as Astonishing Ant-Man, Generations, Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel, Halley Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D., Batman 66, and more. Together, they created the graphic novel Captain America, The Ghost Army. That came out earlier this year in January 2023. We're excited to talk with both as we recently covered the story panel by panel the last 2 episodes. Alan and Brent, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've been wanting to ever since the book came out earlier this year. We've been just dying to get you on, and we're glad you're finally here.
Well, thanks for it was awesome.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
and Brent, I got to point out you're wearing very similar. You're wearing the Captain America logo that I have on. Is that your favorite time period of Captain America? And by the way, I'm going to say it's the red, white, and blue logo that we saw on the Cap comics.
Yeah, when I first kind of exposure to Cap was through a bunch of comics I got as a garage sale, and it was kind of that mid 70s, late 70s kind of. And they kind of switched that logo around a little bit, but there was just some great comics in there. And the artwork, I mean, I always felt like Captain America is one of those kind of like Daredevil. They've always just had top tier talent on that book that's always sort of been able to like one up each other a little bit, or so yeah, that just fell right in my wheelhouse. And I just remember reading those things over and over again till I almost were falling off. But yeah, this is my logo. This is my Cap era logo. I do love like the Brubaker era where it was like went to the really old school one. But to me, this is the Cap logo. And I think we actually used the Brubaker one for the book. So, but I would have loved to have seen this on there, but yeah, that's okay.
That's cool. That's very cool. And I'm looking at us. I think we're all roughly, you talked about, in the 70s getting the comics. I think we're all roughly in that same age range. I got to tell you, so are a lot of our listeners. So not only did you come to the right place talking to Captain America fans, but you're talking to your people as far as time period for the most part too. We actually have all different ages, but so before we get into Ghost Army, maybe the two of us could tell us a little bit about when your interest in comics started, and then also maybe a little bit of how you broke into working into the industry professionally.
Yeah. I'll let you go first, Alan.
Oh, we're both still okay. All right, so I'll go first. So my comic story is a strange one because my parents did not think that comics were literature. So they never took me to the comic book shop, despite my my many requests for them to do so. And I kind of picked up comics on the sly, like trading toys on the with, from neighbor kid, to neighbor kids for their comics, or picking them up when I could. I had like this. I think I had an Indiana Jones comic that was number 3 of 4, and of a mini series, and I never had 1, 2, or 4. I had a couple of random Micronauts comics. Just whatever I kind of ended up with. I would kind of hoard those and hide them, in my closet. It wasn't like my parents were going to throw them out if they found them, but my parents were always like, they wanted me to read the classics, and they were always putting classic novels into my hands, and I had to kind of find the stuff that I really wanted to read on my own. It wasn't until I got into college and my roommates had long boxes full of comics that I started really getting into back issues and reading, getting caught up. So one of the people that I roomed with,
did you finally get the Raiders of the Lost Ark 1, 2, and 4?
No, I don't. I've never known. I don't know how it ends. I hope Indy does okay. I don't know how it ends. So
he died.
No, I roomed with a guy named Greg Bunch, and he had a huge collection of comics and had a weekly pull list all through college. And I would read his current comics that he was getting. This was back in the 90s. And I would read his back issues. And in fact, he's the person that I dedicate Ghost Army to, because he's the guy who let me read all his comics. He's the collector who had the stacks and stacks, the long boxes full of them. And I went back and got caught up. So in many ways, I feel like I'm always playing catch up. Like I have the Marvel Unlimited app. And every night before I go to sleep, I'm reading old comics still on that app that they're constantly, scanning and digitizing. Yep. There. So he's got the book there, and I've got it dedicated to Greg Bunch, who let me read his comics. So my story was coming to comics. So I think maybe not having them as a kid made me even more desperate and more eager to get to them when I was in college, and made me really a diehard fan. That's the lesson for any parent. As soon as you tell your kid they can't do something,
right,
they are going to find a way to do it.
Yeah.
I was the same way with Playboys.
Yeah.
Brent, how about you?
Have a collection of those.
How did you get into comics?
It all really kind of came when Batman '89 hit, and I was like in 4th grade, I think. And I'd always kind of seen Spider-Man and stuff on TV with cartoons and stuff, but I wasn't fully aware of comics. And when that hit, it was just like a craze of like, oh my God, this movie looks amazing. I really want to, get more into comics. And you would see comics at Walgreens and the mall bookstore and stuff, but I didn't really get any until we went on a road trip to Wall Drug, South Dakota, this little hole in the wall place. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like this strip mall in the middle of South Dakota, and it's just, there's nothing else around. And they've done this like hokey promotion for it that like they have billboards for it in Japan, they have billboards for it in middle and random places all over the world. So it just is like, what is Wall Drug? And it's just a strip mall. There's nothing really unique about it, but people come all over to see it. And we stopped there on a trip on the way to Mount Rushmore when I was in 4th grade, summer before Batman came out. And they had a big spinner rack of comic books. And my dad knew we had a good couple hours left on the road trip. So he bought me and my brother a bunch of comic books from there. And I got an Incredible Hulk issue from the Peter David run, and I got a West Coast Avengers, and I got a Silver Surfer book, and I just was addicted right off the bat. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I want more of these, and I just reread them, and then started like with drawing paper, trying to redraw panels and stuff like that. And the cool thing was I still have those issues that I got from Wall Drug. And then about 2 years ago, we did a trip with my 2 daughters and my wife to South Dakota to do Mount Rushmore, and we stopped at Wall Drug, and they don't unfortunately have spinner racks anymore, which stinks. But I did bring my 2 comics that my comics.
Oh, that is so cool!
And I got a picture with them outside, so that was pretty cool. So, kind of bring it full circle.
I gotta tell you, that's the beautiful thing about still being in the comic book industry years and decades later, is
Yeah.
that nostalgia that it brings back.
Yeah,
Right.
for
You can
sure.
pick up something and it just takes you right back
Yeah.
to that time period.
Yeah, I can't. It's the things I can't remember that my wife wishes I remembered, but yet I can grab an old comic from like my collection and be like, I bought that at this store when I was like 13 and we were on a trip, you know, and I just remember that stuff so well. But you know, like I said, if I could remember the honeydew list as well as I remember where I got some comic books, I'd be doing a lot better probably.
So Brent, how did you break into the professionally into comic books?
Obviously always just grew up love drawing, would draw, you know, from comics. You know, I'd have paper and I just try to recreate. I was always trying to get into Wizard magazine with you know, stuff that you could submit into that in the 90s. Never got in, unfortunately. Just always was drawing, and I was really lucky that I had two parents who recognized that this was like more than just something I like to do. I love to do it, and they were very encouraging. And as I got older and I was in high school and I was like, okay, I think I want to go to art school. We started looking at schools, and me and my brother took a road trip from, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois area, and we drove into Chicago to go to, before it was Wizard World, it was Chicago Comic-Con. And we drove in there and we were just walking the aisles, and the Minneapolis College of Art and Design had a booth there, and it was promoting their comic book program. And I was like, whoa, there's an art school that has a comic book program. And so I grabbed a bunch of information from it. And my parents, over my junior year, I think Thanksgiving, we had a little break, fall break, and they drove me up to check out the school. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do and where I want to go. And so I ended up going to what we call MCAD, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And I went for illustration. I double majored in illustration and comic book illustration. And I was taught by Peter Gross, who had a nice run on Lucifer for Vertigo for a long time. And then Barb Scholes, who was an inker on Micronauts forever, which goes back to Alan.
Shout out to the Micronauts.
That's right. And you know, I graduated, and it took a while, but I did a lot of kind of like creator-owned or indie books, and you know, just kept sticking with it. And then about, oh gosh, it was almost like 8 years into it, I finally got some DC work, which was Batman 66. And once that kind of started, it's kind of funny. Once DC or Marvel hires you, it's like the other one sees that and they're like, oh, okay, we're good. And then you're kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit. So, and yeah, I've just been doing it ever since. Just too dumb to quit. You know, no. I just love it. I love telling stories. I love drawing them. I love being in my little studio bubble every day, getting to, you know, do my own thing. So yeah, so it's been a good run.
That's cool. And so yeah, just looking at your list of books that you've worked on, and I mentioned a few of them. You know, it's really impressive that you're right. You've kind of gone back and forth between Marvel and DC.
Yeah,
and it's cool to, you know, be working on such major characters. You know, like that's fantastic.
It's always been cool at a certain times too, like getting to work on Ant-Man when the movie Ant-Man came out. Like if you were working on Ant-Man 4 or 5 years before, you'd be like, who did I make mad at Marvel that gave me an Ant-Man gig? Or like getting to work on Suicide Squad at DC, like right as the first movie came out, you know, that was just really cool timing to be able to kind of have those characters in your, you know, I guess your resume, you know, at the apex of when they were probably as big as they are ever going to get, you know. So pretty cool.
That's fantastic. Now, so Alan, when you've been a writer for novels and so on, for doing, and mostly, I guess you're directed towards kind of like a younger audience, right? How did you break into graphic novels?
Yeah, so I've been a professional writer now for about 20 years, and only like exclusively writing for kids. So I've got a couple of young adult novels that are for teenagers and up, but most of my stuff has been for middle grade, like ages 8 to 14. I mean, obviously, people who are older than that read my books and enjoy them too. But like usually, my characters are 13, 14 years old. And the funny thing for me is, so I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. You know, like Brent, I kind of had this this vision of what I wanted for a long time. And I wrote stories all through middle school. I was the editor of the high school paper, was on the literary magazine, went to UT, that's the University of Tennessee for everybody listening in Texas, the other UT. I went to Tennessee to study creative writing, and they taught me how to write, but not how to make any money at it. So I graduated. I started doing a lot of other jobs that had to do with writing or books while I wrote my stuff and sent it out. And actually, one of the first things I ever tried to do was to sell comics. I wrote up some comic scripts with original characters, and I went to the New York Comic Con, which I think was also Wizard World at some point, maybe Brent, but I think maybe it was New York Comic Con back then, and now it is again. I can't remember. Anyway, I went to, I think maybe it was Wizard World when I went, but I remember going around to some of the booths and showing my scripts to editors at the different booths. Of course, it's really hard to break in as a writer without having any art to show, because I'm not an artist, and so it's even harder to walk around booth to booth. But I was in my 20s, I didn't know any better, and I was desperate to kind of get in there. But I remember just chatting with, this was back when they would have big time editors at the booths, and you could just walk right up, and oftentimes they were there to look at the artist portfolios. But I think they were kind of charmed that somebody was coming up with an actual script. They were like, "Oh, you typed something up, and let me see it. I'll skim through it." But nobody ever bought anything from me, and then I started submitting kids books, because my wife was the book and toy buyer for a group of independent bookstores at the time, and she started bringing home all these amazing books and saying, "Read this, read this, read this." I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's this renaissance happening in kids books." And so I kind of set everything else aside, and I started working on that, and I got my foot in the door, and now I'm 19 books into a kid lit career. And then the wonderful thing for me was I saw that Marvel and Scholastic were doing these graphic novels for young readers, and they were taking these Marvel characters. They did Miles Morales, Spider-Man, they did Shuri from Black Panther, they did Ms. Marvel, and I saw they were doing these, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my dream to do comics, and it's with my publisher, Scholastic. So I called up my agent, and I said, how can we pitch me for one of these? And she said, let me talk to him. And she talked to him, and she said, well, they want to know what character you'd want to do. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how do I choose what character I want to do? But then I realized, okay, wait a minute. It's got to be a kid character, or somebody young-ish. And it's got to be somebody who had their powers when they were pretty young. So I couldn't do like Iron Man, because obviously he builds his suit when he's an adult. You could do a Tony Stark as a kid, but
and
not
he
going to be quite the same.
all the time.
I know, he's just a drunk 8th grader. Yeah, just terrible. So no, and so I was already writing a ton of books about World War II. So I was like, wait a minute, what if I pitched him a Captain America and Bucky Barnes fighting the Nazis in World War II? And I pitched it to my editor, and she loved it, and they pitched it to Marvel, and Marvel loved it. And the next thing you know, I was writing a Marvel graphic novel. I was writing a Captain America graphic novel. So, and it kind of came full circle for me, because that's where I'd really started, was taking comic scripts around at comic conventions, and kind of, it just took me, 18 or 19 novels to get there.
Yep.
So I got a question for you, Alan, but I got to go back to Brent, because I have to know who Brandon is. Because we know who Greg is now, Greg of the long boxes, but we don't know who Brandon is and why he wanted his name in a Marvel book.
Okay. When I got to MCAD, my college, I was really lucky. And my first day there, I fell in with a group of guys and stuff that they're like my closest friends to this day. Like, just met them at MCAD, and Brandon and I really clicked. We loved old horror movies. We loved certain music like the same, and we loved comic books. And so he was a writer, and he went to there for film, and he kind of wanted to kind of be a filmmaker too. But he eventually, after we graduated, kind of more focused on writing, and we did a comic book together. It's a create-our-own thing called Horrorwood. It's like a love letter to like 1950s horror films and stuff. And unfortunately, Brandon, after that came out, I had some opportunities to do stuff, and Brandon kind of didn't really keep going with comics. He ended up he ended up being a really good kidlit writer, and he kept pretty busy with that. And unfortunately, he died 2 years ago. He got cancer. He was about a year older than me. And he always wanted to work for Marvel. It was his dream, and unfortunately it never happened. And so, I just felt like, we got a book that we could dedicate, and I felt he was on my mind a lot at that time while we were working on this book. And so that's where the dedication comes from for him.
That's great. That's a wonderful testament to it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm sure his family really appreciated it.
Yeah. The Niagara Falls when his mom read that. So, but,
I bet.
Yeah.
So, Alan, I got to ask you, you suggested that you had World War II on your mind because you had been, working on some World War II stories. Yeah. But I want to know what the genesis was, because I'm always fascinated by how that kernel gets started for a story that, it's not a particularly complex story, but it has so many different threads. And there's so many interesting threads. So I'm curious where the kernel started for the Ghost Army. Was it the location in Transia, this area between like Transylvania and Romania? Was it a desire to work in the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, aka the Ghost Army? Maybe an opportunity for a little horror, a chance to add some characters from the pre-Howling Commandos or the Mordo family angle? I mean, where was the kernel that this story got started with?
Yeah, well, you've got it. It was the Ghost Army itself. So having done a lot of research about World War II to write all the different novels that I've written, I've come into contact with a lot of different little pieces of trivia about World War II, or really interesting stories, some of which I'm still sitting on, and I haven't found a way to work into a novel. Because I write books that have kid protagonists, I struggle sometimes when I find a really cool thing and I'm like, well, there's no kids. Like, how do I tell a story about a B-57 bomber crew when there's no kids on the bomber? There shouldn't be, right? And I don't write like stuff where like, oh, it's the one kid who got to serve on a bomber when there weren't any kids who ever got to serve on bombers. So like, I always try to write my books within the realm of possibility. They're fiction, but they still are within the realm of possibility. And so I'd read about the Ghost Army. So the Ghost Army was a real army unit, and they were, back when you were drafted, they would ask you to fill out all the stuff that you were good at, just so they could pull you out and use you if you had a language that they could use somewhere, or a talent in the motor pool. Like if you worked on cars, they put you in the motor pool. But sometimes they would take those stats and they would say, well, this person was a writer, or this person was a musician, or a sound designer, or a stage magician. Sometimes they would pull these creative types out and they put them into this unit called the Ghost Army. And their job was to trick the enemy. They made inflatable tanks that they set out in fields so that German spy planes would think we had more tanks. They made, like fake planes that they would set out in fields, or fake artillery. They recorded the sound effects of armies on the march, and then put these huge speakers on the top of half tracks and trucks, kind of like the Blues Brothers driving around, with their big speaker on the top of their car, and like drive past villages and play these sound effects so that people would think we had more soldiers in an area than we did. They would set up fake tents with fake laundry and fake, campfires and everything. And they were really adept at tricking the enemy into thinking that we had more troops in places that we didn't. And I desperately wanted to get this into a book, and I was like, but the kid wouldn't be in the Ghost Army. Would it just be like a French kid who meets them while they're fighting in Europe? And I never could find a great way to integrate it and make it really exciting. So when I got the gig to write for Cap in World War II, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I've got this Ghost Army angle. I'll bring that in. And because it's a comic book, then it automatically led to the idea that there's a second Ghost Army. There's a literal one, the U.S. Ghost Army, and then there is this figurative one, or maybe it's the other way around. Because they literally are ghosts. That led to the idea that the Nazis are resurrecting old dead soldiers to be a new Ghost Army to fight the Allies. And from that point on, like I didn't have an idea for who my villain was going to be. I definitely wanted to pull in a supervillain. I wanted somebody from the Marvel universe to be the villain of the story, and not just the Nazis, because I wanted to have somebody with some superpowers to, that was that was worthy of Cap fighting them. So it was really a conversation that I had with the folks at Marvel, where when I was first pitching them my idea just for a Ghost Army story, and we were talking things out, I said, so am I limited only to Cap's Rogues Gallery is, if you will, like his typical villains? They're like, no, anything and everything. Use anybody from any time and any place in Marvel Comics. And I was like, okay, then I'm gonna go for some faves, and that's where we get Baron Mordo coming in, and it gets some magic in there. And then the monster angle, like it was just really incredibly fortunate that like Brent loves monster stuff. Like Brent is like a horror.
Tell, yeah.
His horror stuff is amazing. He just sent out like an 8-pager or something like that around Halloween in his newsletter that was really awesome, like original stuff. That was it, the Burial Brothers. Yeah, it was great. And he loves doing monster stuff and horror, and it was perfect because I ended up writing in a whole bunch of the classic Marvel monsters, and Brent really went to town on those. So it was kind of like the real history of the Ghost Army led me to creating a literal Ghost Army of your resurrected soldiers. And then I was like, well, who's going to have the magic ability to do that? And that's how I got to Mordo.
All right. So I have to follow up on that because it was really fun to see all the monsters. And I say monsters, I'm going to put those in quotes. Right. For those who read the story, they understand that. And so we're treated to Fang Fang Foom, Man Thing.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody who's like Sauron. We got the Marvel Zombie, which was Simon Garth, many others. So were every single one of these that we saw, were they written into the story, or did you, Brent, did you have some leeway to add some of the characters you thought would fit the story?
That was pretty much open-ended. I don't think you had written any specific characters in there. You just
I think I said originally, like I gave a few and said like I want to pull in as many Marvel monsters, but the horror characters as possible. But that gave Brent a lot of room to pull in some faves.
Yeah. And then I got very Marvel horror nerd and was like continuity conscious. And so we had like all of the editors, and I'm like, well, Simon Garth didn't show up until this, and everybody was like, you know what? These are like holograms. So like, let's just have fun with it and not worry about, continuity and stuff. And so once I got the go ahead from the powers that be to just be like, whatever, I was like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
And so, I was just throwing in anything I could, think of at the time, and, whatever kind of went in my head. So I was like, all right, we're going to do this guy, we're going to do this king. And it was so much fun. Yeah. I loved it. So
based on what Alan was saying about how much you love doing monsters, was this must have been a treat for you to add these classic creatures when you thought you were just doing a World War II story?
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of like knew, that was going to fall in because the first chapter alone, you got some ghost, you got ghost soldiers and stuff like that, and ghost armies and zombies. And obviously there's kind of like you can't really go too deep, like wasn't going to be drawing like brains or anything like that coming out or anything too grotesque. But at the same time, I knew instantly we were going to go into a little bit of a horror slant, which was really fun. But yeah, that was, obviously where that's kind of the beginning of the third act of the story. So it was just like, it was cool to do that one because it was like we were on the home stretch of the book when we started doing that. And it was just a really fun way to kind of get into that home stretch of the book that we were almost done. And it was just, you've been drawing these same other characters for a while and stuff like that. So they're kind of like the last new characters you get to reintroduce in the book. And so that was kind of a refresher and stuff. So, but yeah, just had an absolute blast doing it.
And monsters are a lot more fun to draw, I take it, than tanks and helmets and
Can confirm.
I do want to get into that. But you brought up something an interesting point. You were in the act 3 or act 4, and you've been drawing these other characters for a long time. When we have guests on the show, I kind of have an idea in the back of my mind that a monthly book, they're doing a monthly, right? The illustrator is taking a month to do each one of these books. How many, I didn't look at how many pages there were in this book, but and so how many pages were in this book, and how long did it take you to illustrate the entire thing?
It was 150, and we took about a year. It was a tough book. No, there was, I think Scholastic and Marvel kind of had an idea in their head of what it was going to take, and then I think we kind of got realizing once we got into this, and like so many pages had World War II tanks, and there was just a lot of stuff to it. And we were, I'm not this, the other books that in this line of Scholastic books were done in a style that was, the Miles Morales one is kind of like if you done in the style of the Spider-Man animated movies that have been coming out. And I'm not saying that that's easier to do, but I think there's a process that you can do to speed that up, where this was kind of done in a traditional, like I want to say, like I think my art kind of is like kind of like a throwback style and stuff like that. It looks more like a classic Marvel comic you probably read in the 70s and 80s or 90s and stuff. And so it took a little bit longer than those other books did. And so we did have a little bit more of a longer time than those guys did. And we did have a couple artists kind of help it out on a few pages here and there. But yeah, I think the whole thing for me took about 10 months to do. And so I'm super proud of it. I think it turned out really good. And it was, there was a lot of challenging, fun stuff. Alan did not hold back. It was grand, a lot of stuff. I mean, I look back and I think a lot of pages on the regular had about 10 or 12 characters, with soldiers and stuff like that. And so, but yeah, it's an epic.
And Brent was drawing like backgrounds that where we had editors who were very interested in making sure it was historically accurate. And since we were presenting World War II, even though it is the fantasy world of the Marvel universe, it's got all these superhero characters, and we make allusions to other characters in the Marvel universe. And you pointed out it's in transient, it's not even in a real country, not our real world. So even though it's all fantasy, we still wanted it to feel real. We wanted it to feel like it really happened in World War II. And so, Brent's drawing, making sure that the tanks are appropriate to the time and the place. When we were drawing like the Maximoff house, he was talking about, do we put a sewing machine in the back, or what would they have a sink, or would they have water outside that they got from a pump? Like, we were asking questions like that. That necessarily slow things down. It wasn't just like here's a random computer lab in the background, and we could just move on. We were worried about the clothing that everybody else was wearing besides Cap and Bucky, and of course the uniforms that Cap and Bucky were wearing. A lot of time and thought went into that, and Brent can talk about that, I know. But just for the outfits, the clothing that the non-hero characters were wearing, we were trying to be as accurate as possible. We had a big conversation about whether or not Sophia should be wearing a dress or pants when they go out adventuring, and like a skirt or pants. We eventually went with pants because Brent was like, it's going to be easier to draw her climbing a mountain if she's wearing pants. And we were like, would a woman really have worn pants at this time? We had a lot of kind of more in-depth conversations and about the little stuff like that I think a lot of people wouldn't expect to go into a comic book like this.
Yeah, we got lucky too. One of our editors was really great about historical clothing and stuff like that.
She makes her own like she does costuming that's historically based.
So, I mean, one of the things I noticed, because I'm a big history buff, and so I always sort of hone in on real world history, and you said it's in a fake country, right, with fake characters, but you want to make it historically accurate. And there's a lot of call outs to real world history. There's the Japanese internment during World War II. There's the World War I Battle of Brasso. There's Pee Wee Reese. Even the Ghost Army itself, right? And I have to wonder, like, and I think I know the answer here, like how intentional that was, particularly since this is a publication between Scholastic and Marvel for younger audiences.
Right. For me, it's really important. Look, all of my books are novels, and so they take a fictional character. I drop a fictional character into a real world situation, and so if I'm writing about D-Day, I want to write my own character and write things that didn't happen to a real, that wasn't a real person, but I always want to try and find things that would have happened to a real person in that situation. And especially when I'm writing about a real event like D-Day, which I did in Allies, then I'm taking things that really happened to people and then fictionalizing those. And so it was already part of my DNA to come into this and say, well, that World War One battle that I refer to, these ghosts that are popping up that are World War One soldiers, that's a real battle. You know, I was sending Brent pictures of Brasov, like a real town. And I was like, here's the real town that I'm talking about. Like, if you can reproduce that, that'd be awesome. And like, I actually looked, part of the mythology, part of the fantasy of this is that ghosts can't cross water. You know, it's a thing from some traditions of ghost stories and moving water. And so I actually looked for a town that didn't have a river in it. So like, it's a real town that really doesn't have a river, so that they don't have a river to cross to just hide away from the ghosts. So there were a lot of very deliberate decisions like that. You're absolutely right. So that if you're a kid and you go and you Google or check out Wikipedia about one of these real things that I've dropped in there, you're likely going to find out the real story behind it. And then the same way is if you look up the Maximoff family and you're like, boy, that name rings a bell. And then you find out, oh yeah, here's all those Marvel characters that are associated with the Maximoff family, right? And so there were Marvel Easter eggs, and then you could really say that there were real history Easter eggs as well.
How about, I got to ask you, I mean, two things. One is you talk about kids Googling, right? And I will admit that I Googled some of those things because, and that's got to be, I mean, that's like when you're into a story, that's an indicator right there that you want to know more about what the story is telling you. So kudos.
I do it all the time myself. Yeah.
Right. The second thing is Pee Wee Reese, right? You could have picked any number of legendary baseball players from the 40s, but you picked Pee Wee Reese. And I wonder if there was a particular reason why you did. He was a pretty stand-up guy. I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Brooklyn. I mean, the Brooklyn connection, and you know, Cap's from Brooklyn, and I know it's Bucky that makes the reference, but I love that New York feel that so many Marvel comics have, and that, you know, like when Cap runs into Spider-Man and Spidey's like, I'm from Queens, he's like, hey, I'm from Brooklyn, you know, like it's two New Yorkers and just in costumes and you know and fighting baddies, and I really liked that, and I love the Dodgers. I grew up a Reds fan. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and looked north to the Reds because my dad was a big Reds fan growing up for himself back during the Big Red Machine. But then, so my weird story is about baseball that because I was in Tennessee and now in North Carolina, the Reds actually claim both states as their territory. And so I can't watch the Reds on television, where all their games are blacked out because they think I'm going to drive 8 hours to Cincinnati to go and watch a game. So I was like, well, I can't watch the Reds anymore. And so I actually wasn't watching baseball all night. And I would wait till my family went to sleep, and I would turn on the West Coast games at 10 o'clock. And I started watching the Dodgers years and years ago, back when Vin Scully was doing the announcing. And I just became a Dodgers fan. And that led me to reading about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I wrote a book called The Brooklyn Nine early in my novels that's about Brooklyn baseball. And so I had to throw in Pee Wee Reese from the Dodgers and that whole connection.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I say he was a stand-up guy because, you know, back when Jackie Robinson was going to join the Dodgers, he was one of those guys that refused to sign a petition against him joining the team.
And in fact, I think the first day that Jackie Robinson played, he walked over to him on the field and shook his hand. And a lot of people point to that moment as the moment that it gave all the fans permission to love Jackie Robinson, because they loved Pee Wee Reese. And if Pee Wee Reese loved him, then they had to love him too. And that was a huge moment it's just a great moment in sports. And so yes, a very deliberate choice, because he's a stand-up guy. And I always like making, you know, if I'm going to throw in a quickie baseball reference, it's going to be to somebody I like, not somebody who's a jerk.
You know, that's a great story. And look at you, Bob. I'm so excited that you actually had a sports reference. This is a
mark your calendar.
Yeah, this is going to go down as historic. I appreciate you doing that research, Bob. That's awesome. So, Alan, this is just a quick question for you, and then I got a follow up for Brent. there were a lot of fun little Easter eggs throughout the story. So just a few were like Bucky wishing he had a superpowered hand.
Thank you for noticing.
Mentioning the government might put he and Cap on ice after the war.
Yeah.
Cap saying, quote, strange stuff. We need a sorcerer like that on our side.
Yes.
Was it fun writing a story that had so much history where you could make playful nods to what was to come?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a point where Bucky and Sophia are climbing Mount Wundagore, which is itself another reference, and she says, "Oh, this mountain's got all kinds of weird stuff, like the magic wood that's from a guy who makes puppets that come to life from the magic wood." And I think I get into like the high evolutionary is going to. Yeah, the talking, the cow. Somebody says, she says, "Oh, there's like a legend of a talking cow," and that's from the high evolutionary, and aliens or something underneath. Anyway, that mountain's been used anytime Marvel needed something weird to happen in Eastern Europe. Mount Wundagore comes out. So I made a ton of references. So this goes back to that early phone call with Marvel, and I said, what can I put in and what can I not put in? And they said, go to town on the Easter eggs, go to town on the references and the allusions. They said the only thing you can't do is use the movies. It has to be the comic book continuity. And I was like, that's cool. I've read tons of comics. That's great. So all of the Easter eggs are stuff that comes from the comics. They may have been mirrored in the movies in some way. Obviously, Bucky and the Winter Soldier in the films as well. But I always made sure that they had comic antecedents. I had a ton of fun with that, and at some point I was like, "Is this too much?" And they were like, "No, we love it," because what it is some of those may go right over the heads of the young readers, but for you guys, for us, for those of us who've grown up reading these comics or read a ton of them at some point in our lives, those references we're going to catch and get a chuckle out of. But my challenge as well was to tell a story where if this was your first Captain America book you've ever picked up, you're not lost. You're going to learn who Cap is. You're going to learn who Bucky is. You're going to learn what they do and how they do it. And you can pick it up and it can be your first experience with Captain America. And so none of those illusions, they couldn't be load bearing walls, if that makes any sense. Like they had to be things that were just there for fun, but you didn't have to know them to understand the plot.
Yeah, that's a lot like watching The Simpsons, right? I think a lot of kids, get that, but the adults get some of the comments, right? And the humor and stuff like that.
Right. Disney's done a great job of this with their kids' movies.
That's true.
They put in some jokes for the adults. They know that the parents are bringing their kids to the movies, and they put in a couple of jokes every now and then for us. And so that was me doing the same for a parent who maybe wants to share this Captain America book with their kid and say, like, I love Captain America. Let's read this book together and both get something out of it.
Yeah. So Brent, how about for you with Easter eggs? Sometimes illustrators like to throw something in there in the background. Did you get a chance to do any of that?
I mean, the monster thing was like my chance to really go nuts and kind of do something where it's like, oh, I can throw in, Fing Fang Foom, or I can do the monster of Frankenstein and stuff. So that was like my big opportunity to kind of play with that kind of stuff. I think I did kind of maybe model a couple of those money shots of the Nazi soldiers after a few of my friends, but my friends are like, I don't know if I really want to be a Nazi soldier. So my chance to sort of sneak friends in there, kind of, I'd done that before in the past, but in this book, every main good character is pretty well spoken for. So usually they're fine with being a criminal of some sort, but no one wants to be a Nazi.
No, nobody wants to be a Nazi. No.
It's funny about that. It's funny.
I think there's a few spots though where I think it was like there was a village attack scene where the knights, the reanimated knights, come to town, and there's a really fun page where like I just pulled a pose, like a Jack Kirby pose, because I had Captain America books laying around, and stuff, and there's just stuff that Jack did that I was like, oh man, that's cool. And just one, I think Captain America's leaping into action, and I kind of stole the Jack Kirby pose from a cover or something like that. I couldn't tell you which one it was, but just on a whim, I was like, that's the perfect pose for this page. And so there was a little bit of that and stuff like that I kind of did. It's funny. I hate drawing that chainmail stuff. I just love Captain America, but I was like, I am not drawing that chainmail. And so I kind of pulled from like Chris Samnee's run.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because
you got to ask him now. He did a lot of real thoughtful stuff on the costume.
I looked at this art, and one of the things that came to me was this reminiscent of Chris Samnee. Totally not John Cassidy, right? Because of the chainmail, right? But I totally saw Chris Samnee in this. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Well, thank you. Chris is a friend of mine, and he's one of my favorite artists in comics today. And his run on Cap was, not long enough for me. He's had a couple short stints, but I loved what he did. And it was him, and it was Mike Zeck, and it was John Byrne. And there's just been these guys who have drawn it, and they've made it look cool, and they've given the illusion of his chainmail without drawing every little one like Cassidy and all these other guys. To me, for whatever I do, it just feels like it stiffens that drawing. I remember trying to do it at the beginning, because I've drawn Cap before, but I've never drawn him I've drawn him in a few spots. I drew him in Ant-Man a little bit, and I was like, man, I just hate this. Isn't jiving with me. And so I just kind of found my own way of like cross hatching and doing stuff that I don't want to say I swiped it, but I just kind of through osmosis, I just sort of saw how some of these guys who didn't draw it that way did it. And I was like, oh, I like that, because it's more fluid. And it also goes back to the comic books of the 40s and stuff like that we were kind of putting them in. They weren't drawing all that chainmail either. And so I was like, yeah, you don't have to do it that way. It's just you don't have to peer pressure me into doing that. So.
All right. Well, speaking of peer pressure, so Bob and I have a debate on something, and I'm curious where you stand. Which arm does Cap normally hold his shield?
Ooh.
And is this just something simply known, or does editorial request it?
I never got a note about what hand, unless the only time I ever got is if he had it in one hand and then you screwed up and you put it in the next panel, and obviously he wouldn't have switched it yet. But in terms of that, it's funny, because I had the same question when I first started, and I was like, I'm assuming he's a righty. But then you start going through books and you realize, oh my God, everybody's just whatever works for that panel. If you want it to flow a certain way, I've got to just assume Steve Rogers is ambidextrous when it comes to throwing that shield. And it's just, he can do it righty, he can do it lefty, it doesn't matter. And I will totally own up to the fact that I totally just, whatever I wanted the panel flow to be, I was like, well, he's throwing it with his left in this one, and he's throwing it with his right in the other. And so I
would have said that he always wears it on his left arm. Not always. I mean, like you said, our different artists have done whatever they want. I would have said default left to punch with the right.
Yeah.
But like you said, I always kind of saw him as a righty. But you also see those times when he's using it like a club, like he's got it on his right arm and he's slamming it into somebody or some robot or something and smashing it. But I would have said shield on the left, punch with the right.
It's funny too, because he throws his shield a lot in this book because of the way the zombies are, they're wind. The best way to fight them is through wind. So he's doing a lot of trying to create motion and stuff. And so there is a lot more, he's doing a lot less smashing with it than he is whipping it around. So
I was trying to do a lot of different stuff with the shield, like there's so much of just like banging it off of stuff or the classic sort of just knocking somebody out with it. But I really tried to think outside the box with the shield and, waving the ghosts away. When you throw the shield at them, it goes right through them. So maybe you can dissipate them, that sort of thing. So I tried to find some different ways to use it. I use it as a way to shield himself from an explosion, but also to launch himself into the air by putting it underneath himself.
That was a cool scene.
Thanks.
It was a little I think we could do that in the comic, but not in the movies type of scene,
Yeah.
right? Like that.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
You had to have the step by step, and I even drew it out with stick figures so I could show Brent what I was talking about, because I felt like I couldn't. It was hard to describe it on the page, and so I drew this really lame picture of of Cap, a stick figure Cap throwing his shield down at this little toy truck and it, bouncing up an explosion. And Brent always was able to make it look amazing, and from my little doodles if I ever had to. No, I don't know. Where do you guys fall on the shield question then? What are your opinions?
Well, I think Cap is ambidextrous. I think he may normally hold it on his left, but he can work either way and operate. He can punch just as effectively with his left hand as he can with his right, and vice versa.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. I think he's ambidextrous, and he normally does keep it on his left.
Yeah.
I think he is typically right-handed. So if he was going to write something, he would write with his right hand, or eat or something like that. But
when he drew comic books, he would draw.
Yeah, exactly. But I think when he was fighting, I think Steve is one of those guys who's constantly training. Right. He always wants to be ready. He always wants to be prepared. He wants to be his peak performance. So I think he trains just as much with his left side because he wants to be prepared if something happens to his right side. And so he wants to be able to throw that shield with the left hand just as much as he throws it with the right hand. So I think with the shield, he's ambidextrous. I think in general, he's a righty.
But I think the most important question that the listeners want answered, Alan, is did you practice those moves with your shield as you were developing them in your mind?
Yeah, Brent, before we got on here, I told him I've got that metal shield, and
you do.
I have to admit I have pretended to be Steve Rogers and fought some ghosts and other villains.
Did you wave them away with their shield?
No. For me, it's always I only fight things I can punch and hit, because that's the fun part. But I will say that there is a sequence that I drove Brent crazy with, I'm sure, where Bucky and Sophia are sparring while a conversation is happening, and I was really descriptive of she blocks like this, and then she does this, and then flips him over like this, and I actually got up in my office and stood up and tried to work out how the moves would be in writing those, to describe them, because I wanted it to be something that when I handed it off to Brent was something that you could show panel by panel the sequence of events. It still was kind of I'm sure it was a nightmare, because it was me trying to describe physical action. I think I ended up sending you a video of somebody doing it, didn't I? Like that flip that they.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I just it was like somebody on YouTube's got to have done this attack and flip, and I found somebody doing it and said, "Here, see if you can break this into 4 panels."
Well, next time just reach out to Bob. He was a lifetime Marine.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Yeah, not lifetime. I'm out now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, he's still alive.
Yeah, I'm still alive. I'm not.
They never let you. They never let you.
But it was 25 years. I mean,
it was. It was. Yeah, it was a while.
Career.
That's what I should have
said. How about we do
that?
There we go.
So I got to ask you, Alan. So explaining the ghost army, you have the character Jim Morita. He's explaining the ghost army. I think it's on page 20 or something. And he explains that, and you said this, they recruited musicians and painters and fashion designers, stage musicians. And then he says, even a couple of comic book artists. And I have to know, because I didn't see that in my research. Was that a creative license, or maybe a tongue-in-cheek nod to Joe Simon and Jack Kirby?
Well, actually, it was a reference to Stan Lee. Stan Lee was not in the Ghost Army, but he was recruited by the Army to do instructional videos or instructional films at the time. And I think he and who else? I think Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, was in on this group as well. And they found some creatives who were skilled in getting information across to a wide audience. And I think Stan Lee was in on that, and Dr. Seuss, and I think there's somebody, Frank Capra, who directed It's a Wonderful Life and other films, of course, was involved in making those films. So it wasn't it wasn't it was a little it was a little bit of a joke because Stan Lee had not been in the Ghost Army, but they did pull other people out like that and Stan had been making comics before the war, and
Sure.
and of course Jack Kirby did serve, but not in any kind of capacity as an artist. And in fact, I think he deliberately didn't talk about that on his information that he submitted because he really just wanted to go fight. I mean, I think that by the time the United States finally entered the war in 1941, World War II had already been going since 1939, and Kirby and Simon created Captain America before we were in World War II.
Right.
Like, you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir here, but those comics started coming out as almost propaganda to say, like, we should be fighting Hitler. Like, we know what he's doing to the Jews in Europe. We know what he's doing to our allies. We should be in this fight. And before Pearl Harbor, that opinion was so unpopular that when these guys made their comics with Cap punching out Hitler on every cover almost, there were people who gathered outside the Timely Comics office and protested these guys. And the mayor of New York at the time, Fiorello LaGuardia, was sympathetic. He also believed we should be in the war. And he put police outside the Timely Comics offices to protect these guys so that they could keep making their comics and not get hurt. So no, I did want to talk. There were a whole lot of comic creators who served in World War II, not in the Ghost Army, but I did want to kind of make a quick kind of allusion to that, to some of the more famous ones who'd done that. And then famously, sort of after the war, Kirby would draw all kinds of guns. Like he drew, I think, on the Howling Commandos for a while, and the guns that he drew were not realistic. And finally, somebody came to him and they were like, "Jack, these guns, they don't look like any real guns." He's like, "I don't care."
Yeah.
He's like, "I don't have to draw guns like they really look. Get out of here." Like, they're like, "Okay, yeah, you're Jack Kirby. You're right. You don't. Sorry,
I'm drawing 19 books a month. I don't have time.
I know." He's like, "You don't have to look like real guns. Get out of my face." So Brent, if you get to the level of Jack Kirby, then we won't make sure those helmets.
Skip over the research.
Those German helmets were bedeviled you. I know
they were. They tricked me. They stumbled me on the get go. They have a funky shape to them that took me a while to get to them. So,
Brent, talking about it, what type of research did you have to do to make sure the military equipment, the uniforms, the vehicles were representative of that time?
Well, I just go back and I think of any, like he was saying, like with Jack, it's like, how did he have reference for all these guns and stuff like that? Thank God we have Google now. And I have to tell you, our editorial team was super awesome right when the get-go, when we started the book. They had already found a bunch of reference for stuff for me, that they just had a PDF folder of a bunch of stuff that was all itemized for certain things, clothing, tanks, and stuff like that. So that was great. Alan was awesome with reference. He'd have links in the script that I could click on. So that really sped the process up. And then too, it was just a Google search of certain areas, and then, clothing and stuff like that. So it was definitely the most reference heavy book I've ever done. But thankfully we had a really awesome team of people who kind of had to help prep all that for me. So it was kind of right there when I got started. And then, just a lot of questions and stuff. We were really good about the layout stage when I did layouts that, I'd send them back to Marvel, and then Alan would look at them, and then people at Scholastic would look at them, and we would get a kind of a PDF back with like certain things of like, you might want to look at this, and there would be a link in there that was great. So, it was a lot of work, but really, with everybody kind of chipping in on that, it didn't really slow the process down at all. So so it was good. I got really used to drawing a lot of that different trucks and tanks and stuff like that, for sure. So
you'd have half tracks for the rest of your life.
Yeah, right.
Alan, I love the way that you've added backstories to two, I think anybody could argue, minor characters in the canon, right? Two that came from the mid 1960s. Jim Morita, who appeared in Sergeant Fury 38, and Anthony Baskerville, who showed up in Strange Tales 135. And both of them maybe had been in 3 or 4 books after that and then never heard of again. And then you created Andrei and Sophia Maximoff. Maybe these are previously unknown distant relatives of Wanda and Pietro. And I personally love when authors give more depth to some of these overlooked characters. Is it rewarding for you as a writer to be able to leave that sort of stamp on canon? Because, I mean, once it's there, right?
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's one of the real joys of playing in a sandbox like Marvel's. There are so many creators over time who have created so many characters and worlds and settings and adventures, and you can go back to those and you can say, wow, here's this character from the 60s that gets mentioned like once, twice, 3 times maybe, and then totally discarded. And if you love that character, you can take that character and you can really expand on him or her. You can delve into their backstory. You know, it was, again, really important to me that nobody's evil in this just to be evil. I mean, the Nazis, they're evil. So that was pretty easy. But of all the Marvel characters, like I talk about Mordo's motivation and pull in his actual story about his father being killed by his grandfather and how he seeks revenge for that. And these are, Crowler's a real character, you know, from Doctor Strange comics, and the Baskerville character is also a real old character from Doctor Strange, so I wanted to take those and dive into those a little bit more and say, here are these tiny little characters that got mentioned a few times, and I want to pull them in and build them into my story and get to play with that backstory. I love it. And I think that's the best part of being in a sandbox like this, is you can build on the work of other people. You can take what they've done and run with it. And then you can also say, oh, this little thing that you left behind, I want to jump in and expand on that. So yeah, I put the Maximoff reference in because we're on Mount Wundagore and there's all that stuff about Wanda and Pietro. And so like maybe they're they got the same last name. They got to be related in some way to them. Are they, you know, are they grandparents or something like that, or aunts or uncles? I don't know, but they got the same last name and they came from the same area, right? I'll leave that for the next author to say, like, I'm going to take that character that Alan created of Andrei Maximoff and build on him some more, like tell a story about him as a young man. You know, he's an older man when we meet him in this book. So I totally love that. And the other thing was that I think the original Baskerville did lose his I'm trying to remember if he lost his hand in the original comics, or maybe I made that up, but I now I can't remember. And that's part of the fun of it, is like you're like wait did I read that on a fan site or did I make that up? But you know, it's a ton of fun to be able to go in there and look for those hidden gems that you can expand on. That's tons of fun for me.
Yeah.
You know what was tons of fun for me? I got to tell you, when I saw that this book was being published, I was super excited. And I can't remember which of you on Twitter posted that you had received an early shipment of books from Scholastic, and you posted a picture of this pin.
Yeah.
And I almost had a heart attack because my prized possessions are my original.
Oh,
look at
wow.
that, right? And
Nice.
and I have the Planet Studio ones, the plastic.
All right, Bob.
ones.
Sometimes
describe it.
Sometimes
the
Bob
folks at home.
forgets that we're strictly audio here.
we're
Bob,
on-
you
right,
want to talk about what you're
Sure.
showing?
I was just showing our guests the original Captain America Sentinel of Liberty badges from the 1940s, which I have a few of, and they're my prized possessions. And so I was desperate to get one of these. And I actually ended up ordering a copy of the book from a small bookstore that you two gave a talk to. And it came with this little autograph card that you both had autographed.
Oh, nice.
and it came with the pin, thank goodness. But this is a great pin. And I wonder if you seemed surprised when it showed up in the mail, but I wondered if you had any inkling or any involvement at all in.
Brent, you're entirely behind this. I was surprised when it showed up.
made
Brent,
it.
you got to tell the story.
Yeah, I designed it.
Yeah.
I'll send you a screen grab. We made like 12 different versions of it.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended up settling on that as a nod and stuff. But we tried to actually incorporate, for a while, we tried to incorporate the actual original Ghost Army patch, the real, and we thought that would be a really cool way to honor them. But obviously, when it's a marketing thing, they were kind of like, we don't really know how that's going to go over. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board, and then we saw those old pins, and I was like, we should just do that pin. And so yeah, there was a lot of heavy influence on that, obviously. And thankfully there wasn't any issue with kind of honoring that and stuff. And so I was really proud on how they turned out.
They are awesome.
And yeah, they sent us both a bunch of them. So
they sent them in. Okay, so the box we get has boxes of those pins at the bottom, and on top it had these like the first chapter of the book printed up as like an advanced reader copy.
Yeah.
And so I get the box, and I'm only expecting the advanced readers. I didn't know that Brent had designed this. I didn't know that Scholastic made them. I had no idea. So I opened my box and I see a whole bunch of arcs. I'm like, cool, I'll find a way to give these away. Then I'm like on Instagram or something, and Brent's like, check out this pin that I designed. And I'm like, where did you get that?
At the bottom of your box.
I was like, I want one. And they're like, well, we sent you like 100 of them. And I dig down in that box underneath the arcs, and there's boxes of them. I'm like, I had no idea they were even in there. And Brent and Scholastic had been designing these things the whole time and getting them printed and made up. So that was a big surprise to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. That was a real treat for me, because I'm so impressed that you have those, because I've read a lot of the old Cap comics, and they would have this thing in there: send a dime, to this address, and you can join the Sentinels of Liberty. And of course, Marvel has done a Sentinel of Liberty comic now, and in my new book that I've got coming out in February, I talk about the Sentinels of Liberty as a fan club, like kids who want to send off for it and that kind of thing. So I was already a fan, and then I saw that Brent made this amazing pin, and I'm as excited about that pin as you.
That's awesome! I'm so glad.
Funny story about that. No, yeah, and the funny story about that signed book plate that you got. So they sent me a whole bunch of book plates, and they said, sign these, and we're gonna send them out with books. So I signed the book plate, right? Well, I didn't know they were sending them to Brent next. They just said sign these. So I signed my name real big and fat in the book plate. And then I show up at an event, and I see one, and Brent's had to sign like really tiny underneath it. And I'm like, now I'm the
with
jerk
a long name
who,
like Schoonover too.
Yeah, I've got the short name, and I'm the jerk who wrote his name really big in the box, and there's Brent Schoonover at the bottom. I was like, oh, I feel like such an idiot.
I just emailed you guys a screen grab of all the variations of the enamel pin that I went through.
Oh, cool. Yeah. We'll check that out. We'll share that in the Facebook group. We do have a few questions from our patrons, if you don't mind.
Sure.
First one, Alan, is for you. I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Hi, Alan. Mark Domeyer here. I teach middle school English. My students love your books. I'm just curious what the secret is to writing. For example, Captain America: The Ghost Army is so perfect both for teenagers and adults. We can both love that style of writing that you have. What is your secret to writing in such a style that everybody of all ages can enjoy it?
Oh, that's a really cool question. And thank you for reading my other books and for sharing them with young kids. And for me, a big part of my process is that I try to take my young readers seriously. So I talk about tough stuff, and I show hard things on the page. I tackle difficult topics. One of the first books that I did for Scholastic was about the Holocaust. I wrote a book based on the true story of a guy named Jack Gruner, who as a kid survived 10 different Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He lived to tell his story. I worked with him to write his story up as a novel. And when Scholastic came to me and said, we want to put you together with Jack and have you tell his story, I was like, and they said, we want it to be for ages 8 to 14. Like 8 years old is like upper elementary school. And I was like, guys, if you want me to write a book about the Holocaust for kids, that's going to be tough. And I said, I can't pull any punches, because if I sugarcoat this, that does a disservice to everybody who was a victim, whether they lived or died. And it does a disservice to the kids too. It would be maybe making it seem like this wasn't as bad as it really was, and it was horrible. And so they said, no, we get it, do it. And so I've since then sort of walked that fine line of trying to tell really difficult stories for a young audience. And part of the way I do it is I'm really upfront about all the bad stuff. Now, the concession I make is that and Brent touched on this earlier, I don't put in the gory stuff or the real visceral stuff. So I might say that there was medical experimentation in the Holocaust, but I don't have to describe it on the page, right? So that way my 8-year-old reader can be like, okay, I hear that, but maybe they don't know what it means. And so they don't have a vision of that, where a 14-year-old reader or a high school reader or an adult will be like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. And they can picture it, but I didn't have to say it. And when that kid is ready to find out, when they're ready to know that, they will learn it. I think kids are really amazing at skipping over the parts they know that are too difficult for them and coming back to that later. And so and Brent was talking about how he knew he was going to be drawing these monsters and these scary things, but we couldn't be too graphic with it. And so it's the same kind of decisions I'm making when I'm writing my books. Brent, when you tackled this, were there things that you thought about putting in or had to take out because of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was, the first scene we did obviously was with the zombies attacking, and there had to be a kind of a restraint on like how gory you want to do. I mean, there's certain guys that would want to have drawn, holes in the helmets or something like that. And, there was a good conversation with Lauren and everybody before about like, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on. We start with a pretty heavy, Cap is covering himself with his shield and he's getting gunfire rained upon him. But then we kind of get away from gunfire for most of the rest of the book, just because there's not traditional war going on. We've got ghost armies and we've got knights and stuff. It's a little more, you go into the Marvel universe of things a little bit, but I think you had to have shown that to make it feel real and put yourself in that, that time period to make it be like, otherwise it's just the Marvel universe and it's kind of fantastic. And you don't really, I think it takes some of the emotion out of it, Right. But we've also got some really great emotional scenes with Sophia and her family that explain what has gone on through the war with them, that helps, ground it a little bit. So I think that's just kind of the good thing about Marvel Comics is always, like you've said, like Brooklyn and Manhattan, and it's always been grounded really well. When a Marvel Comics done really well, it's always grounded in the real world. And I think Alan did a really good job of doing those emotional beats without having to hit it home so hard with gunfire and violence, real violence. And so I think we gave just enough of that we can go off and have fun a little bit. So.
Yeah, there are characters in this who die. There are characters that we get to know who don't make it to the end of the story, and I think that it's things like that tell kids I'm playing for real here. I know we're dealing with superheroes and fantasy stories and ghosts, but actually the choice of ghosts as the major things that Cap has to fight was really deliberate. Once I came to it from the Ghost Army, I was like, oh, it's actually perfect because you can't shoot them. And you can't cut their head off with a shield or anything. It limited the violence that could be done to the bad guys in that sense. And then the animated armor, there's nobody really in that, so they can go to town beating on those things and destroying those, and they're not really hurting somebody. So I get real action, real adventure, but with real stakes in there too. And I think that's a big key to writing for kids: high stakes and real consequences, but then low key on the visceral descriptions and depictions.
So one of our listeners, Matthew Glover, asks, what aspect, this is for you, Alan, by the way, what aspect of writing Captain America do you find most difficult?
Oh, what do I find most difficult? You got a guy who's running around with the American flag on his costume, and and I kind of played with this. It's both, it's difficult and it's fun. Part of the thing that I did with Bucky and Cap in this book was I wanted to say, why is Bucky there? Like, why is a junior high school kid running around with a superpowered guy? He doesn't have any powers of his own. And I described it as Bucky does the things that Cap can't do. He sneaks into places. He's a little bit more of a spy. You know, in the Marvel comics for adults, he's maybe an assassin. I don't lean into that, in this because it's a kid's book. But Cap is wearing the American flag all over him. He is a knock down the front door kind of guy, and I even use that kind of terminology in there. And so you can't do a lot of stealth stuff with Cap. I found, at least I don't believe it when he's like sneaking around wearing all that stuff. I feel like he's kind of a knock down the door and let them shoot bullets at me. I'm there to take it, and so it changes the way you tell a story. But that's why Bucky was so great as a sidekick, is that he could do the things that Cap can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pose the same question to Brent. What aspect of illustrating Captain America do you find the most difficult?
The intimidation of 70 years of amazing artists that have just put their stamp on this character. I've drawn a lot of characters for Marvel, and you always have like a little bit of like, oh boy, like whether it's Man-Thing in Howling Commandos, like, trying to make it feel like he belongs from some of those great 70s comics that he came from, or, Ant-Man from, even though he doesn't, when you think of historic runs, people love that character and he's got some great runs, but like Captain America, he's definitely easily the biggest one I've ever drawn, where it's just like, holy cow, like everybody who's anybody has had a bit of a run on this character. And so you're trying to find your version of it and stuff. And I think we talked earlier about, I did kind of take some stuff from the Chris Samnee run with the way I decided to illustrate his armor and stuff like that. But it was also going back and looking at stuff from the 40s and stuff. And we talked about this when we did our book tour, is like, if you go back and look at those early Captain America books, like his wings were almost ridiculously big, like comically big. And I didn't want to do that, but I did choose to like draw his wings higher up on his head than the average probably artist today does. Like they're almost like right above his ears, and they're really small now. Like they don't pop or protrude too much. And I was like, no, man, they got to protrude like they used to. And once I got the script too, I instantly realized how much playing around we were going to do with the shield bouncing off things. But like my original instinct was, well, he's got to have the triad shield. Like I was thinking that would be cool to have. And then I instantly saw, what we were doing with it. And I was like, nope, that's out the window and stuff. So
that would have been cool, but I couldn't have banged it off his stuff.
No. He could have used it as a nice plate or something like that. But no, I think getting over the intimidation of just like, this is one of the most iconic characters you've ever had the chance to draw. I've drawn Batman, but Batman was Batman 66, where there was kind of like this kind of safety net on it. Like you're drawing an Adam West version of Batman.
Right.
And I always and I always approached that concept of like, okay, let's make it seem like the Carmine Infantino and those guys were making a book based off of the TV show. That's kind of how I approached it. So I didn't really draw Batman with this kind of pouchy, soft body style. He still kind of had a nice rip, like Batman was drawn in the 60s in the comic book, but we kind of made it more like Adam West costume a little bit, where the emblem's more in the middle of the body and stuff. So I kind of just, it was really just pulling all these influences, Buscema, all these guys that I love, Ron Garney, Mike Zeck, and just, how is this guy going to be mine? And so thankfully we had 150 pages for me to figure it out. And I felt really good about that last page. So the rest,
one of my favorite things that Brent did was we talked a lot when I was first doing the story with the editors and working on it, about this being a very young Captain America. And it's not his first mission, but it is it's supposed to be relatively soon after he got the super soldier serum and is put into the European theater, and that Bucky is very young. He's maybe not as young as some of the early Cap comics, but I still tried to put him sort of late middle school, like eighth grade was kind of what I was trying to think of for him, or eighth grade or freshman year of high school. And with Cap, though, it was kind of like, maybe he's like 18 years old. He just went in and signed up for the army and got the super soldier serum. And now he looks like a grown man, but he's really only a few years older than Bucky. And one of the things I love that Brent did was, I think he looks super youthful. He just looks like a really, really young man. And you gave him that dimple too, that really deep dimple on his chin, which I don't know. He looks like he just looks like he's fresh off the assembly line, and I think that's exactly how he should look, because it was like an early Cap story.
Well, we only draw him for one page, and that's the last page without his mask on. Yeah. So I mean, that was the only time I really had to draw him. But yet, concept sketches, you did have to draw him just so you kind of knew what he was going to look like and stuff. So, but it was funny to get to that last page and be like, oh, I got to take his mask off and stuff. And, and so, but I going back at just getting over that was the hardest thing. And then obviously the making sure you're accurately portraying everything correctly, because, Alan's known for, being on with his research and everything for his other books. And you think his fan base is going to carry over to check this book out. And that's what he's known for. And you want to, make sure that you don't screw that up. And so, there was a lot of intimidating things about this book, but I would say by about page 100, you're feeling pretty good.
So. We had a lot of discussions about, I don't know if you were in on this, Brent, but I was talking to editors a lot about when he could take that mask off. And we thought about having him remove his mask at the campfire scene early on. And there was a big discussion about, if this is Captain America right off the assembly lines thrown into the war, he's probably not the early comics. It was a secret identity, and the way that Bucky becomes his sidekick is Bucky stumbles in on Steve putting the costume on, and so we really decided, no, what we're going to do is nobody knows that he's Steve Rogers except for Bucky, because Bucky came in and saw him putting the costume on, and he's the only person in this book who knows his alter ego. And so he can't take that off until they are totally alone at the very end of that book.
Yeah.
Another listener, Nate Charles, he writes, excellent work on Ghost Army. I enjoy Doctor Strange almost as much as I enjoy Captain America. And the way you entwined the lore of both characters made for a fantastic story. Any chance we could see a follow-up featuring both characters?
That would be $1 million question right there.
I know, right? I know. Brent and I have both talked a lot about this. I've got lots more ideas. I hadn't planned on expanding the story, like following onto Mordo's story. I leave off with Mordo's dad telling him go and study the mystic arts, and we know where he's going and what's going to happen next if we're Marvel fans, and we know that story. And that's, of course, where he's going to run into Stephen Strange. So I hadn't planned on that, but I was already thinking about other characters who would have been around in World War II. Thor and Loki. There's a really interesting thing. The Nazis, before they built the V2 rockets, they had these enormous cannons that they had built to try and fire across the English Channel and hit England with massive guns. And they put them on train cars because they had to keep moving them around. They knew if they built them into a mountainside that we would just bomb them and they would be gone. So they put them on these massive cannons on train cars, and they would swing them out and take pot shots at England. None of those shots ever hit. And that's what led to them trying to do rockets with the V2 project. But they called the two guns they built Thor and Loki. True story from history. And so I actually thought about doing a story where Thor and Loki show up and be like, guys, that's our IP. You can't use that.
Nice.
And Wolverine famously was in World War II as well, and is a Canadian soldier, and Black Panther's grandfather would have been in there. And there's a great story about the Black Panther Yeah, and there's a great story about the Black Panther tank unit from World War II, which was Black American soldiers who were their own tank unit and called themselves the Black Panthers. Like, the story is just waiting to be written.
It is. That would be a
where they
great
team
one.
up, right? And it could be Cap and Black Panther of the time and the Black Panthers, and then bring in Gabriel Jones from the Howling Commandos. Clearly, I brought in two of the Howling Commandos in this book, and my hope was that what we would see is another book with Cap and Bucky and two more, and another book with Cap and Bucky and two more, and then maybe for a fourth book we would have Cap and Bucky and the entire Howling Commandos with Nick Fury there to bring them together. Like, that was kind of my dream. That's all we got paid to do was one book. I've come up with 4 different books and multiple stories. I'd love to do more.
How about you, Brent?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed working with Alan a lot. I'd love to do more. I think it's kind of crazy they haven't asked Alan to just do more Marvel work in general. I don't want to turn around and gripe at him for anything like that, but yeah, the Invaders stuff would be so much fun to do. Shortly, I know I told my origin of comics, but I got a lot of comics when I was young through garage sales and stuff. And I think I just hit this magic wave of a bunch of Midwestern kids going to college, and they were just selling their collections at garage sales and stuff. So it would be like, oh, here's a bin of books. I'll give me $5 or $10 for that. And like, my collection just grew, and I got like Nova, like I loved Nova. I got this long collection of that. I got a bunch of Invaders books from the 70s stuff that was coming out, and so that really shaped kind of my old love of old school aesthetic a little bit there. And so that would be super fun to do. Everything Alan's talked about, where it's like slowly forming the super group of Marvel Universe stuff through like Wolverine and everything like that. I just see it so clearly, and I just think it would be so fun to do. Never say never. I know that publishing moves at a slow pace, and I always say get the book at a local independent bookstore. But I've just through Facebook, I've had 4 or 5 people already post that this book is still being promoted heavily on Target's website. Like, it was on the main page this week. It was in their flyer for all the kids for Christmas that they send out.
Nice.
And so it's still going really strong. So who knows?
So, start a letter writing campaign to Marvel
and
Scholastic and tell them we want more Captain America graphic novels for kids.
Yeah.
All right, you heard that, listeners.
We had a blast.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking a lot about what you would like to do, but is there anything that you could talk about as what's keeping you busy nowadays, and any personal projects that are coming up?
Brent, you got some. Can you talk about any of the stuff you're doing? I know you got some secret projects.
No, I can't. I was so mad. I
no.
was really hoping for New York Comic Con to have stuff announced, and then it was like on hold. I did just do a couple. I just finished an X-Men cover today for Marvel, which was super fun. I got to draw Cable in his 90s glory with the big fluffy shoulder pads and everything.
Oh, nice. Were there a couple of pouches?
Yeah, so that was super fun. I've been doing covers for them a lot. I just did they've been doing these really cool series of throwback covers for books that they're doing. So I got to do Kraven the Hunter. I just did one for them for like his first appearance and stuff. And man, I'm trying to remember all the ones I've just done. They've been kind of keeping me busy with covers, so that's been cool. I have been slowly whittling away on a creator-owned middle grade OGN. It's about my daughter's skateboarding club. I'm going to keep talking about it until I finally get it done, so it'll fill it into existence. So, but yeah, there is a project I'm working on. It's a creator-owned book with a pretty awesome writer. I just can't say anything about it, so it drives me crazy. So yeah. But
we'll have to stay tuned.
Watch this space.
Yeah. How do people follow you, Brent, just to see when that's coming out? They can be first to know.
Well, I'd say Instagram is probably my most prominent social media, and I'm bschooney.art on there. And then also, if you just go to brentschoonover.com, I have a newsletter. I don't bombard you every week or even every month. But I do a massive, nice, fun newsletter about every 6 to 8 weeks. And I usually do giveaways. I like collecting comics, but I get too many of them, so I just ones I like a lot. I'll put out. If whoever sends something in, I'll send them to it. So I just like to give stuff away. So on there.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that's where I read his Dark Horse comic short.
I try to post stuff in there that I don't normally post on social media. So years ago I did this pitch for Dark Horse about a story I had called The Burial Brothers. It was a little 8-page like proof of concept story. Unfortunately, it didn't get any traction that I wanted, but they did publish it in Dark Horse Presents years ago. But it's just been sitting there. So I was like, you know what? It's kind of like a horror comedy thing. So for Halloween, I put it on my newsletter and sent it out, and it was cool. I got a lot of response from it, and they were like, "What was Dark Horse thinking not publishing this?" And I was like, "I don't know." So, but yeah, so that's where you can find me.
Sounds good. And for you, Alan, what's keeping you busy nowadays?
So I have a new book coming out in February, and it is called Heroes. And it is a story of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's about 2 kids who were on Ford Island, which was right in the middle of Ford Island Naval Air Station, which was right in the middle of Pearl Harbor, the base itself. And they are on the USS Utah, getting a tour of the ship on Sunday morning when Japanese planes descend on Pearl Harbor. And for the next 2 hours, the kids have to try and survive. Next hour and a half or so, the kids try to survive and have adventures and see the battle unfold around them. But they're 2 kids who also love comic books, and so I took a lot of what Brent and I had done on the Ghost Army and the research I had done on Captain America and the early days of comics, and I have these 2 kids. It's 1941. So many of these classic characters that we still know came out in the late 30s, early 40s. They love comics. They want to create their own comics. So the whole time before the attack, they're talking about the character they want to create. And I took a page out of the Sentinel of Liberty from Captain America. They even talk about that. They call their character the Arsenal of Democracy, which was a term that FDR had used for the United States. Back before we joined the war, we were through the Lend-Lease Act. Now I can go down a rabbit hole talking about history. So Bob's going to love this. So I through the Lend-Lease Act, we of course were sending lots of munitions over to our allies in England and in Europe to help them fight the Nazis without participating in the war ourselves, not until Pearl Harbor, of course. And so FDR called America the Arsenal of Democracy. And so they come up with this character they call the Arsenal, but kind of like the way Cap was known as the Sentinel of Liberty, and a deliberate reference to that. And they want to be comic book creators. One of them is the writer, and one of them is the illustrator. And they are hoping that they will grow up and be comic book creators. The problem is that one of them is Japanese American, and of course, the nation is going to turn on Japan and Japanese Americans immediately during and after the battle. And Stanley, my Japanese American kid, is worried that nobody really wants to see what a Japanese American artist would draw. Doesn't want to see a Japanese American hero, which they want to create. So there's the real battle, but there's also a lot of superhero stuff in there, a lot of references to the early comics of the 30s and 40s, or early 40s. And to me, it's all a larger metaphor. I look at Pearl Harbor as and World War II as the birth of the United States as a superpower. And when you're talking about superheroes and when they get their powers and what they emerge to do, I think it's a really great thing to compare, superheroes who get powers and then what they choose to do with those powers. And the United States came out of World War II producing 80% of the world. Like, we had 80% of the factory production in the world because everybody else had been decimated, and we had turned everything over to war production. We were the superpower that emerged, and what we did with that superpower, that's the rest of the story. That we had our origin story in World War II, and whether we've been heroes or not is open to interpretation for history. But anyway, it's about the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's got tons of comic book stuff, real comic book stuff, in addition to the kids creating theirs. And then at the end, there's actually a 10-page comic, not drawn by Brent Schoonover. As much as I wanted that to happen, I know. Brent's, you can't get him anymore. Brent's
He's too busy doing covers.
Brent's elite. He's elite. He's elite. So we see the product that the kids drew at the end of the book.
That's great.
So it's
that.
a novel, but it's got a little bit of a comic book angle to it as well.
And that's
February.
Scholastic?
It's called, it's Scholastic. It's called Heroes. Comes out February, I think first week of February.
It's up for pre-order?
Yes, you can pre-order it now at your favorite independent bookstore, as Brent shouted out, or your favorite e-retailer, wherever you like to get your books. You can pre-order it now.
All right.
You heard this here first, Mark Domeyer. You need to go ahead and order that for your classroom.
That's right. Yep. That's the next thing. And then we're also doing a graphic novel version of Refugee, which is a book that a lot of people who've read my stuff will be familiar with. It's my biggest book. There's an artist named Sid Finney who is doing the artwork for that. I've seen like original character sketches that he's done for the characters. They're amazing. And that book probably will be out in 2025. That one is considerably more than 150 pages, Brent. So I know you'll sympathize with poor Sid on that work.
I have to tell you a funny story about Refugee. I was at my oldest daughter's parent-teacher conference today, and I walked into one of the rooms, and her teacher had Refugee sitting right on her desk right next to what she was doing. And I was like, Alan Gratz. She's like, I love Alan Gratz. And I was like, well, funny you should say that. And so
you're like, well, I've sat in a lot of hotel rooms with him eating pizza and watching football. And let me tell you, he's not worth it.
I think all of a sudden your daughter, Brent, all of a sudden she got extra bonus points in the class.
Yeah, I think I saved her for geography.
Awesome.
So Alan, and if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So probably my newsletter, just like Brent was pitching his. Go to my website, which is www.alangratz.com. It's ALANGRATZ.com. And my newsletter, because I used to be big on Twitter, and now I'm not on Twitter as much. And I'm on Instagram, but I don't know. I don't have the great visuals that Brent does. So I'm not as great on Instagram. So anyway, best place to find me is at alangratz.com, and my newsletter, which also, like Brent, I won't spam you with. It comes out about once a month.
Fantastic. All right. Well, and we'll put links to both of those in our show notes. So anybody can find those pretty easily. Alan, Brent, it was such a pleasure wrapping cap with you. Thanks for coming on the show. It was a real joy and pleasure having you.
Thank you for having us. This was really fun.
It was.
Yeah, it was amazing. I'm so excited about your podcast and the focus on Cap. What a great character to focus on. Thank you guys for having us.
All right, Bob. So, wow, that was a lot of fun. Alan and Brent they had a lot of stories, and it was really interesting to have them on the show and take us through their thought process and all the work that went into this. Wow, 10 months to put together this story for Brent and all the work and research that Alan did. Man. It really paid off. I think they hit it out of the ballpark as far as what they were trying to achieve, and they talked a little bit about a sequel and maybe a third and a fourth, and the ideas they had for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, they were very exciting. I hope Tom Brevoort's listening and Alana, and maybe we could put a bug in their ear, because some of those ideas were pretty sweet. And I think you're right. I mean, I was really fascinated by the amount of, like you said, the effort, 10 months, right, for the art alone. Mm-hmm. And of course the writing and the research for the illustration, but all of the editing contributions that went in. I mean, it really did take a village to create this graphic novel, in addition to Alan and Brent. And I don't think most people know how much work goes into a project like this. But at the end, you got this book that you created, and it's added to the canon. It's added to the depths of some backstories, some characters, and it's brought a lot of enjoyment to young readers, but also adult readers. So, man, that's really something to hang your hat on.
Yeah. Now, it was a fun story to cover and a great opportunity to talk with the creators for that. So we would love to bring them back on the show if they do get around to doing a second one. That would be a lot of fun.
I'm really excited. I ordered that book immediately as Alan was talking
Oh,
about.
Heroes?
Heroes, I pre-ordered that because I thought, man, that's something like, my son's not a big reader. He's 13, right? He's right in that age group that Alan writes for. And he's not a big, but he tends to like those sorts of books about disasters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know why, but as he was talking, I thought to myself, well, this will appeal to him because it's Pearl Harbor, and he sort of likes those historical novels about like disasters and things like that. But it also touches on some of the things that I really love, and this book might be a way for the two of us to connect. And I think that's something I think a guy like Alan is shooting for, right? Something to bring different age groups together to enjoy.
That's perfect. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that, Alan. You got one sale out of this. And that's great too, because Bobby's 13 and the characters in the book are around that age. So he'll have something to relate to in those books. So
yeah.
Fantastic. I hope the book is very successful. So Bob, next episode, we've been in 2023, the last 3 episodes, and 4 if you count the interview with our wives. Now we're going to take a little trip back. We're going to go all the way back to 1967, and we're going to do. I don't think we've done this before, Bob. We're doing Avengers story, right? This is the first time I think we're doing an Avengers story with Cap in it.
Yeah, I think we talked about Avengers 71.
I take that back. Episode 2, we did Avengers 4.
Yeah, how could I forget that? Yeah,
okay.
You're right. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was 164 episodes ago.
Yeah.
But no, this is going to be Avengers Volume 1, 43 and 44. What is that, you may ask? That is the introduction of the Red Guardian. Now, the Red Guardian was a Russian response to Captain America. They wanted their own version of Captain America, so they created the Red Guardian. Some of you may be familiar if you watch the movies, right? You've got in the Black Widow movie, you saw the Red Guardian in there, and in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie, he will be in that as well. Well, also in the upcoming Thunderbolts comic book, which is going to be written by Jackson Lanzing and Colin Kelly, that comes out this month, and Red Guardian's going to be in that. So we thought, hey, why not an Avenger story that features Captain America and introduces Red Guardian? Let's dive a little deep into that.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's a great idea. I mean, a lot more people know about the character now because of the movies, but they may not really know about the character in the comic books. And there were several Red Guardians, but this is one of the most influential and, the one that's probably most active in the comics. So I think it's perfectly appropriate that we go back in time and dig a little bit deeper into that character.
Absolutely. That'll be a lot of fun. All right, Bob. Well, as always, it has been a blast wrapping cap with you.
It has. I can't wait till next week.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbonis, and you have been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.